peeps. So, I'm going to be reading from the Writings Inspired series, the Real Legends book specifically. Oh, yeah. And the poem today that I'm going to be reading is called Whether I Am Able. Now, this is kind of like a play on words title because this very much has a lot to do with special needs. Um, and there is the word ableism floating around right now, right? Which is, of course, the um, stereotype or, I guess, marginalization of groups saying that they are not as able, right? We've gone over this, how that definition is one of those things that has gotten kind of mucky and watery, as happens when words are being first used. So, I try to stay away from labels, but you have to talk about it within when it comes up. You know, you think about the ideas, the frameworks of that surround special needs or special needs education. It happens. So here we go. Ableism, confessionalism, isms I never knew had a name. In a way, wandering through life, I feel the same. A voice for those who are disabled, become poets of the writer's word, feel enabled. Whether I am able is hardly a testimonial to the struggle. Beyond spoken, hardly written, more than a language, more of an instilled imagination. It isn't gain, it just is. To obtain, remove my eyes, and then you will see the testimonial truths you refuse to accept in me. So, do not be fooled. I did not write this after reading all the read aloud poems for young people, like the videos I've done recently. So that's not what inspired this poem. This was in this book already. Um, because it is so rhymey. And I love that about this. Okay, so just to kind of break this poem down, uh, I kind of dropped some heavy words right there just to say to the reader, like, boom, like we're going there. Like ableism, we went over. Confessionalism is one of those a juxtaposition I wanted to throw right in there because ableism is one of those derogatory things, I guess. And confessionalism is associated with the type of poetry style that people with disabilities tend to take on sometimes. Um, at first, I guess, it's one of those things where they don't want to tread into that territory because it makes them somewhat victimized, right? Because confessionalism, root word confess, they are kind of confessing, you know, what it's like to be in the perspective of a person with disabilities on a daily basis. So, but this is a part of the genre. Confessionalism is definitely I don't want to think it was a style, um, but it's a theme that you can find. Um, and I kind of, again, I'm a huge fan of playing on words. And so, of course, I go into it and I say isms I never knew how to name. And that's kind of me as to say to call it the idea that while labels help us kind of classify and understand the world around us, we as humans tend to lean on them sometimes too much. So there you go. Um, it kind of makes it, in terms of people who have disabilities, that whole umbrella, like stereotype, generalizing, overgeneralizing them, and kind of not being able to see the individual is kind of the idea I'm going for there. Um, and so that's why I kind of call upon it and say, in a way, I feel the same. I have my own things and like I don't really talk about much, but there's this part where I kind of, again, play on words. I say, if a voice for those who are disabled, become poets of the writer's word, feel enabled. So there's that contradiction, disabled, enabled, within the same sentence, which of course was done on purpose, knowing me. And so it kind of is just a nice, repetitious, beautiful way of describing um, how a lot of the times different uh, populist groups of disabilities often are almost always misunderstood in some time or form or facet, and it's just kind of a stereotype in and of itself that we kind of need to move away from, for sure. That we do understand a lot about disabilities more than we ever have, and our education reflects that. A lot of what we whose culture is capital, we are starting to have more representation. All these things um, are normalizing people with disabilities, and that is only good for inclusive efforts if people are on board for those types of things. So I repeat the title, right? I go Whether I Am Able, which is, I think for me, there isn't like necessarily one type of meaning I was trying to nail down for that. I think it's like, oh gosh, what's the author? Oh, she's amazing, and she does. Um, I'm sure there's a term for it, a literary device term for it, but Whether I Am Able can be used in a variety of ways. For example, it can be said, whether I'm able doesn't really make a difference, or whether I am able has no bearing on this situation, or it can be interpreted in a multitude of ways, basically. And I mean, that in itself is thematic with what we've discussed so far about the poem. So, um, definitely super intentional, as usual in this one. And I go into that a little bit more about how, with all this progress, yet still it is beyond spoken. It's hardly written, but it's more than a language because it's someone's daily life. That's their way of being. It isn't gained, it just is. So, and that is one of those powerful lines, I hope, was like, it isn't gained, it just is. Like the simplicity of it kind of reinforced that idea for people that it's not some diagnosis, because I hate that word, because it infers that it can be fixed. Because not a lot of times, most of the time, 90, 100% of the time, it can't be. And so, you know, again, I'm letting the words do the talking for me. So, and then of course we have my Shakespearean like ending, right, to wrap it all up. To obtain, remove my eyes, and then you will see the testimony of truths you refuse to accept in me. Um, is basically kind of calling out, because I like to do that sometimes. Like we have to do that. We have to call each other out sometimes to keep each other in check, you know. And it's kind of like, take a walk in my shoes, and then you will get it, because you you do this, but you really need to sit down. You need to read my poetry. You need to, watch videos, talk. You need to, and it's not as to say, you see those posts on Facebook where people are like, go do your own research, and they don't want to take the time to talk to people and explain. I'm one of those people where I think we need to do that. We need to connect. That's how we build empathy, is we tell stories to each other. Say, hey man, this happened to me, and that's why that kind of just, you're not, it's not a big deal. You are communicating. So uh, it's a very, not meant to be like a super aggressive, like, or dark, or, you know, doom and gloom type of thing, but it's supposed to be one of those very raw, direct, passionate poems that just calls upon the reader to act. One of those call to act moments, and I love that type of poetry, of course. Um, so that is Whether I Am Able, and I hope you guys liked it. It is short as per usual, but I definitely had fun with these. I think that we might be starting a new book, a new YA book, a young adult novel. And I haven't decided what it's going to be the first time. I usually always have some idea of what I want to do, but more to come on that.